Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Today my guest is Kolisa Sinyanya. Kolisa is a PhD candidate at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. In her research is part of a growing body of work that critically examines the biogeochemical cycling of the ocean regions that are currently under some hope. Today, we get to find out how she got into the science field. Then we're going to dive into the world of oceanography and get some insight on this particular field of science. So stay tuned. Hi, Kolisa, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm very excited to listen to what you've got to tell me and the listeners out there.
Thanks.
So
happy to be here.
I'm glad. So tell us about yourself, please.
All right. So my name is Kolisa Sinyanya. I'm from Tata in the Eastern Cape. I was born, bred, and battered there. Some interesting fact about me is that I'm very unconventional. Even with my PhD, my supervisor is always like, I'm the odd one. I just always surprise her the way I do things, and she's learning a lot from me. I know this is supposed to be outside of the science stuff, but honestly, I don't have much outside of the science stuff. So let's just make it generic that I am very unconventional. That's who I am.
Okay, so in terms of being unconventional, can you just give us a quick example? Even if it's in the science field, because you say that the supervisor says that you are the odd one out. So just a quick little example on how being the odd one, how you are the odd one out.
So, for example, everyone in science, well, most people in the sciences have this belief that, well, in academia in general, but especially in sciences, have this belief that as a scientist, you have this straight line that you have to follow where you basically have to do observations, go into the laboratory, sample, do observations, analyze, work on the data. And yes, we all have to do that part, but then there's an additional part where we have to communicate our science. And the way I do it is very different from most scientists because I use different tools of communicating science. Okay. And this started way back when I was younger. When I say younger, I mean in my honors. That was my entry into the research world, and I didn't like the way things were done. It bored me, so I decided that I would take my science and communicate it in a different manner, because I also additionally realized that most people don't understand what we do. I mean, as a scientist, you grow up knowing that, or rather not grow up, but you grow into knowing that, okay, this is how it works. These are the basics of the sciences. For example, I'll make an example now with the COVID-19 that is going around, which is a disease which is caused by a certain strain of virus, or rather a certain virus. Not everybody understands how that works. And as a scientist, most scientists, especially scientists who are microbial work-based, will know what that is. Even if they don't work with viruses, they work other things, but not everybody knows what is happening. And so we take for granted what people understand and don't understand. And that's what I identified. And I decided to take my science to a very unconventional, not entirely explored way, which is social
Yeah.
media.
Okay.
And so when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just talking about science. Well, I knew what I was doing technically, but in terms of giving it a name, I didn't know that it was called science communication. So
Yeah.
in that way, I have become one of the first Africans, and basically even globally, the first scientists to dive into the science communication field, where we literally chop down, or and by chopping down, I don't mean chop down the science, but chop down the words that we use to communicate so that the next person is able to understand us. Because the science we do is not just for us, it's
Yeah,
for
definitely.
everybody. Understand? We are the brains behind it, but the entire world, the entire population needs to understand what is happening. And so that's how unconventional I am. And I do this not just on social media, but on different platforms. I get invited to speak about the science. And I know that I need to um, change my presentations according to the audience that I
Yeah.
will have. So I have
Oh,
become known, and really, my supervisor calls me the legend in the science communication circles. So I've become known as someone who is really good at that. Yeah, so that's how unconventional I am. I believe that science needs to evolve with the times. The world has changed, and so has our way of communication. And most scientists do not believe in that. They believe in writing those technical journal papers, which most people can't even comprehend, not even other scientists in the same field. They have to, it's
yeah.
like a puzzle that you have to piece together. And science doesn't have to be that difficult. And this is the reason why majority of people think science is unreachable. So I come out and with my unconventional way, try to get everyone to see that science is not, well, it is tough, but
Yeah.
it's not unreachable, and it's not undoable.
Okay, interesting. So, like you say, you are very unconventional, which is good, especially like you said that you're trying to get people to see that science, like you said, is not tough, but it's reachable, right? But
Yes.
before you were this legend in the science field, and you were the one of the, I know people call you the Tata Boffin, you know.
Kind of
What actually
often.
made you? Yeah, yeah, I've seen that going around. So, what actually made you get into the science? Um, the influences that actually got you into this field that you obviously are very passionate about with the way that you want to communicate it better. But let's just rewind all the way back to what actually got you into starting the science.
Well, I grew up in a household where I don't know why my parents were so fascinated by science, but it obviously was something that we also taught. It was like a fever at home, the science thing. Everyone was so into being a scientist. And to be honest with you, I have no idea where it started. But my mom and my dad were um, very encouraging for us as the kids to go into science. So I grew up watching science shows with my dad and my little brothers, and we just sit there. And I mean, when it's something you watch all the time over and over again, it somehow becomes part of your DNA.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't mean it like that. Scientists will chop my head for saying it. I'm part of the DNA. I don't mean it like that, scientists. But yeah, you you sort of you gravitate towards it. And I mean, the science shows we would watch were, yes, Nat Geo was one of the shows that we really enjoyed, but there were even more in-depth science shows. I forgot the name of the one I really liked, where they would pose a question, which is basically a hypothesis. They would pose a question and be like, okay, so why is the ocean blue? I remember this particular episode where they were asking about the ocean. It's quite interesting that now I'm studying the ocean.
Yeah.
So why is the ocean blue? And then they went ahead and sampled the waters in the ocean. They're like, well, the water's not blue when you take it from the actual ocean. So what the heck is happening? So they would look at different scenarios that, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And then they will have this conclusion that, okay, the sky is blue. Maybe it's the reflection from the sky, and when the ocean turns greenish, there's probably something in the ocean that is known as algae, stuff like that. So that show used to fascinate me. And another thing they looked at was why some people are bitten by mosquitoes more than other people. So they would look at blood types, how warm is this person's, the temperature of the person, all that stuff, and the environment. And basically, that's what we do in science. We analyze everything. We look at where this comes from. We go to the place. We take it from the place. We see where it comes from. We compare it to that other thing that we took from another environmental condition or area that has different environmental conditions. And we come compare and look at how they are different and how they influence their environment. Maybe the environment is the way it is because of them, and it's not the other way around, that they are the way they are because of the environment. So those are the things we look at. And that's what I was fascinated by. So as a little girl growing up, I had that was the name of the show, Inquiring Minds. So I had an inquiring mind, and I got to university. I mean, it was kind of natural where I was going. My mom wanted me to do medicine, but medicine was not my thing. I was like, well, if I do anything medical, it would have to be scientific. It would have to involve the scientific method, not just being a doctor, because that's not for me. And hey, I went for science.
That's great. I mean, I'm going to take it back to what you said, that it's quite significant that way back then you remember that show specifically about oceans, and then now all the years later, here you are in your PhD studying just that. And with that being said, can you just give us a bit more insight on what your PhD research is actually about and what you guys aim to do?
All right. So in my PhD, I study the microbial communities, basically the phytoplankton, and how they interact with the zooplankton, how they interact with the nutrients. So when you were introducing me, you said the biogeochemical cycles. So those are the nutrient cycles, like the nitrogen cycle. I'm trying to understand how the carbon cycle functions. And I also look at the rates of how the ocean, or rather the actual phytoplankton, because it's not the ocean that takes up the carbon dioxide from the surface or from the atmosphere. It's the actual phytoplankton. So how the phytoplankton at what rates the phytoplankton take up the carbon dioxide per hour, per day, and therefore we can make conclusions based on those. So to do all that, I use what we know as nitrogen isotopes. And if you go back to your chemistry,
what are your nitrogen isotopes? Yeah, for people who are not in the science field.
So if you, so this is homework for everyone to go and look up nitrogen isotopes. So for us, we use them to look at how these communities do the processes, how they take up we specifically look at the nitrogen, how they take up the nitrogen and how they use the nitrogen. And we use two different types of stable nitrogen isotopes, which are found naturally in the water. And that's N14 and N15. And when there's more N15 in the waters, we know that, okay, this is telling us this. When there's less, it's telling us something else. So that's what I do in my PhD. And socially, how could I say it assists? Socially, we, as you know, right now we are in the age of global warming, right?
Yeah.
Which leads to global climate change. And climate change has a lot of implications on how we live, on our food security. So understanding how the ocean takes up carbon dioxide is very key right now in these ages, because it tells us, for example, in the aquaculture industry, it will tell us about the productivity of certain regions within the ocean. And that will inform fisheries. You know, fishermen are very smart, by the way, and they can teach us a thing or two as scientists as well. So with my work, I would say socially it is important in that way. And economic, that's just one example, of course. And economically, I would say we are key in advising the government for policy making, you know, and I mean, policy making has a lot of implications on our economy. I'll make an example now with this virus that it's ravaging the entire globe.
Yeah.
And you see what is happening in the US and probably what is going to happen with us, that they get advised, hopefully. It doesn't look like Trump. Maybe I shouldn't talk about the US. Let me just focus on South Africa, because
safer waters.
So, for example, us, we had this lockdown. But now lockdown has sort of, it's a bit too rested or too loose. And honestly, our government is thinking more about the economy. They are thinking about the implications of the virus itself, but they are also thinking about the economy. And to be honest, that has I'm even scared to think about what will happen with the rules that have been changed. But I'm straying away from what I was talking about now. So economically, what my work does, one of the examples is advising the government on how to do things, and therefore boosting the economy, because it's us who understand how the productivity is happening within the ocean, and in terms of being informed about the carbon drawdown, we know that, okay, according to our data and what our data tell us, we expect this to happen, and that's what we advise. We can also advise. I mean, science communication can be another way of advising, where you talk about the work, and whoever is listening. For example, last year I was invited to a text colloquium, common text colloquium, where I had to advise the audience basically on new ways of using phytoplankton or ocean-based techniques to take up carbon dioxide. And that has a huge impact on the economy, because previously they were using machines which emit carbon into the atmosphere. So it basically defies the whole strategy of trying to reduce the emissions. They are doing exactly the opposite. So yeah, in terms of economy.
Okay, so like you said, that one of the panels that you're invited to is to advise people in terms of how to better manage our oceans, which has ripple effects for our economy, right? But the study of oceanography, is not one that you hear about quite. Yeah, oceanography is not one that you hear about quite often, and I'm sure that some people confuse your field with marine biology, right? So for the people, the non-scientists, that they don't.
They do.
Yeah. So
definitely.
Okay.
All the time.
So for a person, for the non-scientist person listening, and those that may, and those that are also in science, like myself, who confuse those two fields, marine biology and your field. What misconception or myths do you want to bust right now, to just be like, set the record straight and be like, this is what I do, and this is what a marine biologist does? And also maybe for somebody out there who's always wanted to be a marine biologist, who might now be swayed into actually going into your field.
Well, the difference between the two is that oceanography is more, I'll say, more analytical. It looks at, we use a lot of mathematics, we do a lot of chemistry, we do, I don't know if you can do oceanography and not include physics. Yeah, for example, I am doing the geochemistry, excuse me, of the ocean, but the physics is extremely important. So it's a number of fields that emerged to make up oceanography, and also atmospheric sciences, because there's a lot of atmosphere-ocean interaction, that is involved in oceanography. For example, people who work with aerosols are in the atmosphere-ocean-based oceanography. And then with the marine biologists mostly focus on the actual fauna that is found in the ocean. So like the animals that are found in the ocean. I can't speak much on what marine biologists do, but those are the differences that I know. We don't really look at the the animals. We look at how the ocean is functioning in terms of waves, in terms of the microscopic organisms that are found in the ocean. We calculate how the interactions happen. We look at the layers that are found within the ocean itself. We look at the hydrography of the ocean. You know, it's a obviously oceanography is very multidisciplinary. So a person might say I'm an oceanographer, but will not be working on what I'm working on, for example.
Oh, right.
Even if we are both in geochemistry, we are not looking at the same thing. For example, I'll be using isotopes to look at the phytoplankton, and the next person will be using isotopes to look at the water masses, for example.
Okay. No, that's a clear definition, and even for me, I have to admit that I also did confuse the two, and I'm sure your study, like you said, it's multidisciplinary, so it involves a lot of different disciplines, and I'm presuming your PhD takes up a lot of your time. However, you are a busy woman. You are involved in so many initiatives, such as Ocean Women, Black Women in Science, the FAME Lab, Antarctic Legacy, Women in Science Hub. This is just to name a few. I'm sure I'm probably missing some. But how do you get involved in all of these programs? And I'm going to add a little twist and still manage to do your PhD. And also with that, I mean, keep up to par with your PhD. And also with that, why do you think it's so important for you to be involved in all of these different spaces and all these initiatives that you're part of?
Well, all these initiatives are part of my PhD. They are part of my science path. Obviously, they are not the PhD, but they come out of the PhD. There's the PhD, and then there are these branches that come off it. And these are some of them. And Ocean Women is the fellowship that pays for my PhD. Black Women in Science fellowship that felt I should be part of their initiative. FAME Lab, I was a runner-up in 2018, where I was talking about my PhD. So in my PhD, there's something called the biological pump, where the carbon dioxide, maybe I should give you homework to look up the biological pump. Look up the biological pump.
So we've got nitrogen isotopes and biological pumps to think about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Antarctic Legacy found me on the internet, where they felt that I am doing so amazing as a science communicator, and they would like me to be part of their organization. So they recruited me like that.
Wow.
And Women in Science Hub is my Women in Science blog, where I do what you do, but I interview women. I sit down with the women and I write the interviews. So how do I get involved in all these programs? Well, for most of them, I get approached. For most things. People always ask me, how do you apply for all these things? I get approached. I always have these emails, and I can't do everything, unfortunately. I mean, you see me doing all these things. These are just probably like 10% because I have a PhD to do.
Yeah.
And most times I have to reject reject them. And before I take on anything, I speak with my supervisor and ask her what she thinks. And she will give me advice and be like, well, if you want to take it, you can take it. You can look at this and this and this and that, and how it will affect our progress. And then in terms of why I think it's important for me to do all these things in my career, because they are, as I said, part of my PhD. And for me, this is building a profile. At first, I was just doing it for fun, this thing. I mean, when I entered FameLab, for me, it was just about having fun and seeing. I didn't even think I would win.
Yeah.
And when I won, I was like, what? I can win? Maybe I should try. Maybe I should try this more often, because I mean, it means I'm good. I mean, I was competing with a number of, we started out 26, and at the end, it was just 2 winners, researchers from the University of Cape Town. And now these are top of the crop in the African continent, and I was top 2. So I was just like, okay, maybe this is my calling. Maybe I should just make this a little more professional. So I also run Ocean Women's social media accounts. I'm their accounts manager. And honestly, I have taken science communication to the boardroom, if you would say. And after PhD, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm asked how I think this is good for my career. My goals are to take this further after PhD, because I mean, I see that science communication is a niche. And even besides anything, I want to make sure that people who come from my background or similar backgrounds are kick-ass at science and believe that they can, just like I believed I could. I mean, if I can do it, anyone can. You know, so that's what my aim is with joining all these, or being part of all these initiatives and organizations, because you don't see a lot of Black women in science. And now we take it further. In oceanography, what? Yeah. A Black chick?
With water?
I always get, imagine. I didn't even realize how big this was when I started. And now I realize that it's super mega and obvious. And it's an obligation for me. I have this responsibility to make sure that I'm not the last one, and there are many more who can join after me.
With that being said, like you said, that you have this responsibility, how then, what would you say to those ones who want to follow after you and want to get into your field, maybe not necessarily oceanography, but really tackle this niche of science communication? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice I would give is that first of all, in science communication, you need to be confident first and foremost, because sometimes you say something that is incorrect, but the way you say it, it shouldn't show that you are not entirely sure about what you're talking about, right? Okay. And I'm not saying in science communication we say incorrect things, but it goes with, even scientists say things that they are not sure of. So the first thing is confidence, because you need to entice your audience. As a science communicator, you have an audience, whether you are writing, whether you are on the telly, whether you are doing it via radio, it doesn't matter. You have an audience, and you need to understand the audience. And audiences are different. We have broad audiences. Sometimes you will be invited to speak to an audience that is rich in a certain field of knowledge, has a rich knowledge in a certain field. For example, I'll use the Common Text Colloquium that I was invited to. Most people there were energy experts. And I am not an energy expert, but I know what I'm doing when it comes to the ocean, and they don't, right? So you have to understand how you portray the message to these people. And sometimes I was invited to a mathematics department to talk about oceanography and my research. And I had to design my talk according to what mathematicians will understand. So you have to be a person who, you have to be dynamic like the ocean. You have to be fluid like the ocean. You have to understand, I don't want to say your audience, but the individuals that you have to understand before you go or before you do your science communication. You have to understand the individuals. For example, when I'm talking on Twitter about my work, I know that on Twitter there are people who are not educated. There are people who are highly educated in other fields. There are people who are educated in my field. It's a diversity of an audience and individuals. So designing what you are going to say is very, very key. It all goes down to designing it, and of course, how you say it.
You're right. That is very, very important, and I hope that somebody out there is inspired by your story and takes in the fact that confidence does go a long, long way. And not to doubt yourself, especially when you do something. And you being a legend in science communication and also taking up all of these amazing initiatives and studying things that are not so common is hopefully one of those things one of the many things that will inspire somebody out there. And that's the reason why I actually asked you to come to this. And I'm so thankful for you joining me today and actually talking to us. And with that being said, thank you so much to everybody listening today. That's the end of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.